Bill Cosby has been free on bail during the course of this trial. Now, Bill Cosby has been found guilty on all charges. So I have just gotten word from multiple reporters inside, and there was a question about whether he should be held without bail, if he should be incarcerated. I've been mentioning that our Lissa Kaplan is the producer who's been covering this trial for us inside the courtroom. And Lissa, I understand you were witness to this extraordinary outburst that I'm told began with a plea to have Cosby locked up. Can you tell us what happened from there?
Sure. After the decision was announced by the jury, the judge asked if there was any further business and stated that Cosby was still being held on bail. And the district attorney stood up and asked, for that bail to be revoked, saying that it wasn't enough. Quoted the civil settlement to Andrea Constant and saying, he said that that over $3 million was a paltry sum to Cosby. He has all this wealth. He has a private plane. At which point Cosby basically stood up and said, I don't have a plane. And the judge said back to Steele that Cosby had been here for over 2.5 years, had never missed a court date, and there was no reason to believe that he would not show up for his sentencing. So the judge told the DA, if he could provide the actual proof, that they could reconsider it.
Well, Lissa, don't go anywhere. Lissa Kaplan I've known for a couple of decades, and she's not one to be an expletive-laden person, and she wasn't there, and for that I'm appreciative. But I do want to give our viewers a further idea of what just happened without making Lissa do it. The district attorney was the one asking Bill Cosby's bail be revoked. He's like, look, he has a private plane. He has great wealth. He could get away. And then Bill Cosby screamed, he doesn't have a private plane, you rear end of that nature. Screaming at the district attorney, Bill Cosby screaming at the district attorney in court and calling him an expletive, which I should not say on television at 2:15 in the afternoon, and I won't, but it's an easy Google if you want it. The long and short of it is, Alyssa, this man who had been so stoic, whose eyes were closed, as the dispatch you sent us prior to this hearing, who had been so quiet and so demure, exploded in the courtroom after this happened.
He did. He didn't make any other emotion from that. It looked, the man his PR man had been leading him in and out of court every day. He's legally blind, and it looked like Andrew Wyatt went to put a kind of hand on him to tell him to calm down, and it looked like he said, get away from me or something to that effect. He looked visibly upset, but other than that one outburst, he didn't say anything. Like you mentioned, he was sitting kind of in his chair with his eyes closed, almost looked like he might have been meditating. At one point, he was leaning back, and that was the only time he kind of jumped up and had his outburst. And then he was quiet the rest of the time. Did he stand, or did he just scream it from his chair? I wasn't watching him when he actually said it, but as soon as he did, I noticed he was standing. All the rest of his lawyers were standing. He stood until basically the judge dismissed him, and at that point, all the media ran out of the courtroom to try and get outside. Andrea Constant, his victim, who brought these charges, is in court. Well, the state, of course, brings the charges, but she was the victim in this case. She was in the courtroom. Others who say they were victims of Bill Cosby were in the courtroom. I'm trying to get a picture together of what it was like when all the jurors came in, the judge is in his place, and then Bill Cosby is in his. The two tables with counselors on both sides are there. And then do they have the foreperson read the verdict, or does the court reporter read the verdict? The foreperson read the verdict. The court reporter asked them what their verdict was, and the foreperson said guilty. Then each juror was told to ask if they agreed with the verdict as the foreperson read it, and they all answered and affirmed that they agreed with it. Andrea Constant was sitting in the front row behind the Commonwealth defense lawyer, behind the district attorney. She was looking ahead. She didn't appear to show any reaction. A couple of rows behind me was a few of Cosby's accusers who were visibly upset. One of them was sobbing. You could hear her, and they escorted her out of the courtroom after the guilty verdict was read. This morning, Lissa, the jurors asked for a specific part of the testimony to be read back. Tell us about that and what it meant. They asked to hear back the entire testimony of Margot Jackson, and Margot Jackson is a Temple employee who worked with Andrea Constant and said she roomed with her on the road when Andrea, was the director of operations for the Temple basketball team. And she said that during one of those meetings, they were watching a news show, and a report came on about an accusation against someone famous, and Andrea said, that happened to me. And Margot Jackson said she questioned her a couple of times, and finally Andrea said, well, no, it didn't happen to me, but I can make it up and get a lot of money and go to school and start a business. So they wanted to hear, we don't know exactly what they wanted to hear, but they read the entire testimony. They heard part of different statements Margot Jackson made, and they spent the whole time, the court reporter read that back into the record.
Right, you don't replay video or audio of such things.
Correct.
The court reporter reads back what the court reporter presented as the transcript of the court proceedings. And after that, I presume, Lissa, they went back into deliberation.
Yes, they did. And then we didn't hear anything until we got kind of, there was some rumors by some of the press that there was rumblings that they saw the attorneys walking around, and we were told there's not a note. And what they have set up here is the press kind of there's an app, and we get a kind of a push notification saying the court will reconvene at whatever time. And it has been saying up until this point, the court is reconvening at so-and-so a time, the jury has a question. And we had been told that we would get a push alert when there was a verdict saying there is a verdict. And we didn't in this case. It just says the court will reconvene at 1:30, and that's all it said. So we knew something was happening. We didn't know what it was. And there has been a very, very strict decorum order in this courthouse for every proceeding involving this case, where we're not allowed to have our phones out. They can be in our bags. They have to be shut off completely. We're not allowed to have our Wi-Fi on. We're not allowed to email anything other than basically take notes. And they had told us that once a verdict was reached, they would make a one-time exception to that decorum order to let us all blast out kind of an email quickly or a quick text saying what that verdict was. So we kind of had a feeling when we were led into court and they reminded us about that it was something.
Well,
other than just a... Sorry.
No, not at all. It had to have been, Alyssa, I was telling our audience that you've been covering courtroom proceedings for our network for many years, even decades. And I just wonder if, having gone through or at least witnessed from afar, the previous trial in which there was a hung jury and they decided we're going to come back and try this again, and having sat through all of this, when you saw those jurors today, did it appear that they had felt the burden of this very important human endeavor in the American experience, that they realized and took to heart what an important task this was?
Brian, I think they were definitely taking it serious. Yesterday at one point they had asked for a number of things, and the judge had told them, I can't give you answers to those questions. And at one point they wrote a note back saying, are we asking for things correctly? Are we doing this right? And the judge basically said, yeah, whatever you ask for and however you're asking questions, you're doing it right. So I think they really wanted to make sure they were doing it right and doing what they were supposed to do. They worked until 9:30 last night, so they worked from around 9 a.m. till 9:30 p.m. last night. Wanted to get it done, from what we were being told, have been working through lunch. So it really seems like they were taking it seriously. Remember, they've been sequestered since the start of this trial, which means they're staying in a hotel room here. They're allowed to make brief calls to their family, but they're not allowed to talk about the case. They're not allowed to talk about much. As we understand it, they've had brief visits on the weekends with their families, but they've been sequestered. They haven't been able to really watch TV or kind of participate in their lives. So they were very serious. They were taking that seriously. You don't take that oath to kind of sit on this jury without knowing how serious it's going to be and what a commitment it is.